1 p.m, July the 18th, 2025. My hour-long lesson with my most advanced student is about to start. About a month or so prior to this, the same student had come in clutching an edition of Chopin Nocturnes, and when the page landed on the 13th Nocturne in that initial lesson, I was excited at the prospect of exploring such a curious masterpiece with an accomplished musician. Little did I know, but this piece would become personally significant, as it would be the last music to be played in the creative hub I had built. A fire would engulf the premises later on that fateful afternoon in July, and my understanding of this masterpiece would be about to begin for real. Chopin's 13th Nocturne doesn't just have a personal significance, but also has a broader importance in the piano literature. The piece's ternary structure is a standalone example of how the simplicity of an A-B-A structure can amplify the horror and power of a piece. A simple structure makes a piece of music easier for audiences and interpreters to follow the evolution of its story. This structural simplicity also exposes any inaccuracies or overindulgences in an interpretation. These insights only became apparent once I began working on the Nocturne sometime in August. My studio, still in eerie darkness and with holes in the walls and ceiling following the blaze, added to the growing feeling that I may never get my business and creative hub back. This, on top of everything else we were going through as a family, motivated me to start the piece. The bleak funeral march that starts the piece, the calm chorale in the middle section that explodes into an impassioned finale, appealed to me. With no students and all concerts cancelled, I had time to devise a new program inspired by this highly charged time, and this Nocturne would help me tell the tale of this dark episode. Tackling this piece wasn't just a cathartic indulgence though. Music for recitals never responds well when it is approached in a way that just indulges me, the musician. It should be the other way round, where the interpreter's experience in the big bad world makes them feel ready and motivated to give themselves fully to a masterpiece. I felt I was finally primed and open-minded enough to bend to the demands of this work. It is human nature to overcook your approach when trying to make a big impression. My initial thoughts when I began the work on my interpretation was to start the first section as slow as possible, so as to give this mournful music the most gravity as possible. I was wrong. The lyrical element of the piece is so important and is what binds the structure of the piece together. And so by slowing the first section to such a somber standstill, the section gains a wonderful weight, but it loses its coherence and direction, which are far more important. Experience has taught me that you only begin to learn about where less is more once a piece has been under the hands and you've began playing it from start to finish. This is the only way to gain a real contextual understanding of the piece. My experience here was no different. The required emotional weight I envisaged at the slower tempo could still be achieved at a quicker speed anyway, through more cultured, calculated brushstrokes like phrasing and dynamics. Throughout the second agitated half of the piece, the score is covered in thick black blotches of chords, with often a single top melody note having to fight for its life to be heard. The difficulty is compounded by the dynamic marking of PP, which begins the section, the pianist now having to balance this dense writing at a quiet volume. Another strange marking is the staccatos in the left-hand chords in the first section. Although the pedal creates a sustained sound which negates the sonic effect of the left-hand staccato, the direction is there to tell us how to approach the rubato and choreography of the body and hand, which is so important to Chopin and his methods. A detached bitten left hand under the spell of the sustaining pedal creates a rhythmical tautness, like a pendulum, that evokes the strictness of an austere procession, which is not headed to the stillness of a graveside, but instead to the heat of a furnace. I don't often like drawing absolute conclusions from what was happening in the composer's life at the time a piece was written. as I think it can sometimes lead to lazy assumptions about what certain pieces mean or represent. But there is a curiosity about the silence and lack of detail around the circumstances that led to the conception of this nocturne. I was tempted to do some research. Many pianists just revert to the boring default attribute, the composer's ongoing health troubles, to the mournful character of the music. The truth is that Chopin's ongoing battle with tuberculosis may have influenced this composition, but more interestingly, in the summer of the same year, 1841, just a few months before the piece was conceived, a huge earthquake could be felt in no.1, Chopin and Georges Sand's countryside retreat. My mind immediately jumps to these octaves in the middle section of the piece that have a quality not too dissimilar to seismic tremors, which so effectively destroys the calm in the music. Furthermore, a great frustration was about to set in as an intended summer of composing and rest was upended by gloomy, damp weather and the arrival of Mary de Rosière to no.1. De Rosière, our friend and confidant of Chopin's girlfriend Georges Sand, would start a love affair with a man named Antony Wodzinska. Chopin was engaged and passionately in love with Antony's sister, Maria Wodzinska, for almost a year back in 1836, and so was petrified to think that the private intricacies of his failed relationship might be being shared between Antony, de Rosière and Georges Sand through inevitable gossip. To make matters worse, Maria Wodzinska had married Joseph Skarbek, Chopin's own godson, in 1841 too. Chopin himself described the piece as an ode to misfortune, with Georges Sand saying the composer was more proud of it than anything else he had written. Some critics at the time didn't like the nocturne, with much of the criticism highlighting how it was different to the other nocturnes the composer had written. It's true, this piece stands alone from the other 21 nocturnes Chopin would go on to compose. Chopin was not writing for the delicate sentimental tastes of the aristocracy who frequented the salons of Paris here, but instead for the hard Slavic sensibilities of the people he left behind in Poland, where defiance and sorrow could coexist in the face of great stress and strife. This feeling is tangible under the tips of the fingers in this music, and in the final measures in particular. A stoicism instead of pity, but mostly an acknowledgement of a situation we might all find ourselves in one day, where grief has to be overcome but not forgotten.